Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking a highly volatile situation that is currently unfolding in the Middle East. We're going to look at the recent United States defensive strikes near the Strait of Hormuz. This is a crucial bottleneck that directly affects a massive chunk of the global economy and, by extension, everyday prices. But more importantly, we'll break down exactly how these immediate, kinetic military actions are directly tied into some incredibly complex behind-the-scenes nuclear negotiations. We'll look at the core reasons behind the current U.S. actions, the incredible difficulty of negotiating with regional actors right now, and how the current administration aims to prevent past funding mistakes. So let's dive right in and see how all the pieces of this geopolitical puzzle fit together.
To really understand the severity of this situation, we have to look at the rhetoric coming right from the top. We have this striking quote from Iran's supreme leader, actively calling for an end to U.S. military bases in the Gulf region, saying the hands of time will not turn back. It absolutely sets a defiant, almost chilling tone for everything we're about to discuss today.
To make sense of all this, here is how we'll break it down. We'll start with the overnight strikes in the Strait, pan out to look at the regional tensions and proxies, take a seat at the diplomatic negotiating table, unpack what we're calling the Iranian ultimatum, and finally, we'll follow the sanctions money.
Let's start with those strikes in the streets and the broader effort of protecting the waterways.
According to the source material, the U.S. didn't just issue a stern warning overnight, they actually took defensive, kinetic action. CENTCOM reported that these self-defense strikes targeted small, mine-laying vessels along with surface-to-air missile launchers down in southern Iran. Now, these are actually the first U.S. strikes targeting Iran since early May. The message from the U.S. was crystal clear here. Any new aggression is going to be met with a far more severe response.
The overriding objective for the U.S., and this was emphasized by officials like Senator Marco Rubio in the source, is incredibly straightforward. This critical waterway simply must remain open. Period. The U.S. stance is that the Strait of Hormuz needs to be totally unimpeded, without any tolls, and fully protected from bad actors trying to lay mines in international shipping lanes.
Moving out from the straits, we need to look at regional tensions and proxies because this is definitely a broader conflict. When you zoom out, you see a region that is gripped by a deeply interconnected web of unrest. The source details multiple fronts going on all at once. You've got the U.S. and Iran engaging in the Gulf, but simultaneously, you have Israel dealing with ongoing drone and rocket attacks from Hezbollah out of southern Lebanon. Israel has vowed to hit these proxy groups back with overwhelming force. But then, in a totally bizarre twist of geopolitical multitasking, diplomatic talks are actually scheduled for later this week between the Israeli and Lebanese governments aimed at improving relations.
Which brings us to a fascinating paradox in the source material, and honestly, a massive headache for diplomats right now. How in the world do you sit at a negotiating table with bad faith actors who are actively committing acts of aggression, like laying naval mines, while those very talks are ongoing? It's just a staggering contradiction to try and navigate.
That leads us right to the diplomatic negotiating table, where both sides are desperately finding leverage.
What's truly fascinating here is the sheer resilience of the diplomatic channel. A regional diplomat confirmed that Iran's Speaker of the Parliament, along with their foreign minister, have remained in Doha to try and hammer out the details of a deal. So, despite facing an immense amount of economic pressure from international sanctions, Iranian leadership is actively sitting at that table trying to negotiate a way out.
But you have to ask, why are they laying mines if they so desperately want a deal? Well, the source provides some really essential context that makes this make a lot more sense. Think back to last summer's Operation Midnight Hammer. That destroyed parts of Iran's nuclear program. Then there was Operation Epic Fury, which severely dismantled their military and effectively sent their navy to the bottom of the sea. Without those heavy conventional weapons, tossing mines from small boats is essentially the very last card they have left to play. They are, quite literally, running out of leverage.
Let's shift to the nuclear side of things, the uranium ultimatum and the path to disarmament.
The absolute centerpiece of the U.S. demands is simple, but it is massive. It's all about highly enriched uranium. The current administration outlined a rock-solid condition that this dangerous nuclear material must be immediately turned over to the United States, brought home, and destroyed, or at the very least exported to another acceptable location where it can be destroyed with atomic energy authorities standing right there to witness it. The absolute red line for the U.S. is that this material cannot stay inside Iran, effectively shutting down any viable path to a nuclear weapon.
To really grasp what diplomats are trying to undo here, the source gives us a fascinating mini-science lesson on how uranium enrichment actually works.
First, they take raw iron ore from the ground and put it through a chemical reaction to create something called yellowcake. Then, that material gets converted into hex, which is a fluoride gas. They take that gas and spin it incredibly fast inside advanced centrifuges. Thanks to centrifugal force, the heavier particles are pushed to the outside, while the lighter ones stay in the middle. They just repeat this process over and over to enrich the uranium. This exact scientific process is what the US wants completely halted and reversed. So is Iran just going to happily hand over their prized uranium to the US? Yeah, probably not. However, Iranian state media has actually floated some counterproposals. They do possess the technical ability to reverse those enrichment steps internally, basically dismantling the danger themselves. Alternatively, they've suggested exporting it to an ally like China instead of the US. So you see, there is actually room for negotiation here, even if the initial demands seem completely opposed to one another.
Finally, we need to look at following the sanctions money, which is the massive economic element of all this.
So, what is the economic incentive driving Iran to the table? To explain the current strategy, the source contrasts the approaches of different U.S. administrations. It notes that previously, under the Obama administration, funds were described as being released in ways like pallets of cash that Iranian officials later admitted aided their drone and missile programs. According to the reporting, the current administration's strategy attempts to pivot away from that entirely. Today, funds are strictly tied up, and any potential release is highly conditional, relying completely on verified, step-by-step adherence to the deal.
And this is where our location, Doha, comes full circle. Qatar is playing a vital, direct role in these behind-the-scenes negotiations because they are quite literally holding the purse strings. The tied-up funds are sitting in Qatar. The negotiators right now are actively hashing out if, how, and exactly when those funds might be released, basically guaranteeing that Iran only gets economic relief if they actually hold up their end of the bargain regarding the Strait and the uranium.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question as we wrap up today's explainer. We've seen the overnight strikes, the incredibly complex web of proxy tensions, the scientific hurdles of uranium enrichment, and the massive financial leverage sitting over in Qatar. Will this intricate puzzle of military deterrence and frozen assets actually bring stability to the region? Or will rogue actions at sea prove that the hands of time are in fact impossible to stop? We're just going to have to watch closely and see how it all plays out.